They don't teach you how to carry invisible wounds. They hand you formulas, morals, rules, but they never hand you a manual for the pain you swallowed just to stay alive. They don't teach you how to grieve for a self that never had a chance to become. They don't tell you what to do with the fragments of your identity scattered like glass after a storm. They don't tell you that healing is not about becoming whole. It's about becoming something new with what's left. Because the truth is, no one leaves childhood untouched. No one escapes this world without scars. And most never learn to see those scars as sacred. They build around the wound, they decorate the cage, they pretend the brokenness is gone, but it grows roots. It wears new clothes, it speaks in their relationships, it bleeds into their decisions. And they call it personality. But it's not. It's armor, worn so long it feels like skin. You were not born afraid. You were not born angry or numb or anxious. You became that to survive, to belong, to function inside systems that never saw you as a soul, only as a role. And now you've reached the point where that mask is cracking. You feel it, don't you? The ache, the unrest, the unspoken grief of all the selves you buried just to make other people comfortable. You've reached the edge, the quiet threshold between who you've been and who you're called to become. And this is the beginning of growing beyond what broke you. Not by erasing it, not by forgetting it, but by walking through it like fire and letting it forge you. Because here's the paradox. The pain you've been avoiding holds the blueprint for your power. That wound, that trauma, that shame that clings like smoke to your lungs, it's not your enemy. It's your initiation. And only those brave enough to face it will ever taste freedom. Not the freedom sold in books or promised in rituals, but the kind you earn when you stop running from your shadow and start integrating it. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That darkness, the one you've spent years denying, is not your downfall. It's your depth. It's your teacher. It's the map back to your real self. But it demands confrontation. It demands you unlearn the false piece of avoidance. It demands you question the stories you inherited, the ones that taught you to shrink, to tolerate, to smile while bleeding. And when you do, everything shifts. Not instantly, not painlessly, but permanently. You begin to see that the wound was never the enemy the meaning you gave it was. You begin to see that trauma doesn't destroy you, it distorts you. It tells you that love is danger, that success is unreachable, that safety is betrayal, that being seen is unsafe. And you believed it, not because you were weak, but because at the time it was true. You had to protect yourself, you had to build walls, you had to become someone else just to stay standing. But you're not there anymore. You are no longer the child. You are no longer the powerless version of you that needed permission to breathe. You are here now, breathing, bleeding, awake, and you have the strength now to do what they could not. Turn your pain into power, not in theory, in embodiment, not as inspiration, as identity. Because growing beyond what broke you isn't about moving on. It's about going in, it's about tracing the scar back to the blade, and then choosing consciously, defiantly, to build anyway, to love anyway, to trust anyway, to live louder than the silence that once swallowed you. This is what most will never do. Most will chase distractions until the day they die, hoping to numb what never left. They'll call it ambition. They'll call it success. But deep down, they're still running. But not you. You're done running. You're ready to face the ruins, not with fear, but with fire. Because the ruins don't scare you anymore. They speak your name. They remind you who you had to become. And now they remind you that you're not broken. You're becoming, and every jagged edge, every memory you thought you had to hide, every battle you fought in silence, they are not blemishes. They are marks of mastery, proof that the world tried to hollow you out, and you turned the void into a voice. You want to grow beyond what broke you, then stop trying to heal into who you were, and start becoming who you were meant to be. The self who owns their darkness, the self who walks with every version they once buried. The self who no longer hides their scars, but carves new meaning from them. Because pain, when owned, becomes wisdom, and wisdom, when embodied, becomes freedom. And once you've faced the wound, once you've stared into the abyss without flinching, you begin to understand. The point was never to return to who you were. The point is to transcend the version of you that had to break in order to awaken. What broke you was the cocoon. And now you are emerging, not as a polished, perfect being, but as a force forged through tension, chaos, and silence. This emergence is violent in its beauty. Because everything that kept you comfortable, everything that once shielded you starts to disintegrate, relationships shift, desires dissolve, attachments rot. The things you once prayed for feel irrelevant now. The goals you thought would save you no longer match your frequency. You don't want validation, you want alignment. You don't want peace at any cost. You want truth, even if it shatters what came before. Because now you understand the real trauma wasn't what happened to you. The real trauma was what you became to survive it. The ways you silenced yourself, the ways you tolerated less, the ways you learned to abandon yourself just to keep the peace. And here's the great reckoning. You are no longer at war with the world. You are at war with your own tolerance. You're at war with the comfort that numbed you, with the habits that sedated you, with the choices you made while you were still asleep. You no longer blame the past, you unplug from it. You no longer crave justice, you become your own redemption. This is where the real growth begins, when you don't need closure to build, when you don't need apologies to evolve, when you don't need the world to make sense in order to make yourself unstoppable. You don't become unbreakable by avoiding pain. You become unbreakable by becoming willing to be broken again, but this time on your terms. Because this time, the break is not collapse, it's carving. This time, pain doesn't control you, it clarifies you. This time, you don't shrink in fear, you stand in demand, not from others, from yourself. You begin to walk with a posture that's earned, a gaze sharpened by what you've seen, a presence that doesn't need to shout, because it carries the weight of 1,000 quiet resurrections. And suddenly, life stops happening to you. It starts happening through you. You are no longer a reaction. You are a response. You are no longer begging for healing. You are embodying wholeness. And that embodiment changes everything. It changes how you speak, because now your words carry integrity. It changes how you walk, because now your steps are chosen. It changes how you love, because now it's not attachment, it's reverence. You're not looking to be rescued anymore. You rest with yourself. And now you're building from a place that no one can touch, because it was born in the silence that no one else could survive with you. This is the reward of walking through what broke you not, that you come out untouched, but that you come out untamed, refined, real, radiating with the kind of authenticity that makes the world either recoil or bow. You no longer adapt to survive. You expand to express. You no longer shrink to belong. You stand to remember. You are no longer the echo of your pain. You are the emancipation of it. Now that you no longer wear your wounds like chains, but wield them like tools, a new dimension opens not of healing, but of capacity. You begin to realize how much you can hold, how much you can see without turning away, how much truth you can digest without fracturing, how much of your own depth you can descend into without drowning. And this capacity, it terrifies the shallow because it makes you unpredictable. You're no longer triggered by the games they play. You no longer flinch when someone tries to use silence, distance, or disapproval as weapons. You don't spiral, you don't chase, you don't explain. You observe, you gather, you calculate. You see 10 layers beneath the surface and say nothing not out of fear, but out of sovereignty. Because now your power is not in being seen. It's in being unshakable, not passive, not stoic, but anchored in truth, in vision, in the self that no longer needs performance to feel alive. And from this anchor, You start attracting different storms. You'll notice it. The old temptations return, but they no longer grip you. The familiar cycles knock, but you don't open the door, because you've upgraded your internal architecture. The parts of you that once begged for attention now demand integrity. The parts that once needed fixing now govern. You are no longer solving problems from pain. You are creating reality from principle. And your standards rise like tide. You don't lower yourself to be understood. You raise your frequency and let alignment decide who remains. You don't give time to the incoherent, not because you hate them, but because you honor yourself. Because what broke you taught you the cost of energy. It taught you what happens when you abandon your inner knowing to keep people comfortable. It taught you that love without clarity becomes slavery, that tolerance without boundaries becomes betrayal, that softness without structure becomes self-erasure. So now you move with both sword and sanctuary. You protect your peace not with walls, but with awareness. And that awareness becomes your authority. You no longer need control because you've mastered command over your emotions, your focus, your frame. And when you have that, no one can hijack you. Not their projection, not their absence, not their chaos masquerading as charisma. You see it all now. And you choose with surgical precision what enters and what exits your world. This is what true power feels like: clarity without compromise. You don't need to prove your growth. You are the evidence. Every step, every silence, every boundary, every pivot, a testament to the self who refused to stay small just because it was familiar. You've grown beyond what broke you. And now the only thing left to do is build from the fire. So you build, but this time you don't build to be seen. You don't build to escape. You build to root. Root into what cannot be bought. Root into what can't be taken. Root into something unshakable. Because now your life is no longer a reaction. It's a statement. And the foundation of that statement, it is not image. It is substance. Not flash, but fire. Not perfection, but precision. Not ambition, but alignment. This is where most fall short. They build castles in the sky, fueled by urgency, fear, and borrowed ideals. They mimic what they think power looks like. They chase aesthetics over essence. But you've tasted the underworld. You've danced with your shadow. You've stared your own unraveling in the face and smiled. So your foundation is different. It is carved out of truth, the kind that doesn't bend to trend, the kind that doesn't break in silence, because what broke you has now become the blueprint, not for pain, but for precision. Every failed version of yourself taught you something the polished ones never could. And you remember how it felt to betray your own knowing, to stay in spaces long after your soul left, to trade authenticity for survival. You remember the cost. So you don't forget, and because you don't forget, you don't flinch, you don't delay when clarity speaks. You don't stay just because something used to fit. You don't second guess your evolution just to protect someone else's comfort zone. You are not who you were, and you never will be again. And that truth, it's not sad, it's sacred, because from that truth comes the structure. You begin building in layers: mental, emotional, spiritual, physical. Everything matters now. The words you speak, the thoughts you feed, the people you give access to, the rituals you keep, the silence you allow, the chaos you reject. It's all bricks. And every brick has one test. Does this align with the self I am becoming, or the self I outgrew? You're done patching holes in houses you no longer want to live in. You are the architect now, the engineer, the sovereign builder of what comes next. And what comes next, it won't resemble anything behind you, because nothing in your past had the capacity to hold what you're about to manifest. Because what you're building now isn't a life, it's a legacy. And it begins with a single sacred choice. Never again will you apologize for how far you've come. Never again will you minimize the wisdom born from your wounds. Never again will you live like you forgot how long it took to crawl out of the fire. You will not forget. You will build from it. And as you build from the fire, you begin to understand the nature of your becoming. This is not growth. This is not healing. This is transfiguration. You are not improving the old self. You are burying it. You are not trying to fix what was. You are forging what must be. And that process isn't graceful. It's surgical. It requires slicing away identities stitched together by fear. It requires extracting beliefs that calcified around your trauma like armor. It requires demolishing the inner architecture built by the approval of people who never saw you clearly. Because the truth is, the version of you that got hurt is not the version of you that's called to rise. You must become someone unrecognizable to everything that once broke you. And this becoming is not about violence. It's about precision. You become so exact in your self-awareness that nothing false can survive in your space. You can no longer be manipulated by guilt. You can no longer be seduced by distraction. You can no longer be held hostage by memories dressed as loyalty. You now see your life not as a path to walk, but as a weapon to wield. Your time, weaponized. Your energy, armored. Your focus, unshakable. And with each day, the distance grows between who you were and who you refuse to live without becoming. You no longer chase goals out of scarcity. You pursue standards born from vision. Because this isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving to yourself that nothing is stronger than the soul that decided to rebuild from within. The world still throws chaos. It still tries to distract. Still wants you to settle for the shiny, the easy, the familiar. But you are not moved, because your direction is internal. Your compass is eternal. Your fuel is the sacred rage of a soul that refused to be buried beneath the expectations of the asleep. You live with a fire now, but not the fire of reaction, the fire of remembrance. You remember what you've lost, what you've survived, what you've seen, and because you remember, you refuse to waste. Not time, not purpose, not this one unrepeatable life. So everything that broke you, it didn't end you. It delivered you to yourself, to this moment, to this awakening. And now that you're here, there is no going back. There is only forward, forward into the becoming, forward into the storm you were once running from. Only now you command it. You speak and the air changes. You decide and the future obeys. You move and your presence rearranges reality. Because this is no longer about healing wounds. This is about leading with them. And when you lead with the wounds you once hid, something rare begins to happen. You don't just inspire, you disarm. People feel it, not in your words, but in your frequency. In the quiet command of someone who has faced the abyss and did not come back empty-handed. Someone who has sat in the silence between breakdown and breath and chose to rise anyway. You're not loud about it. You don't need to be, because now your energy speaks before you do. And what it says is simple. I've been through fire. I carry no illusions. I walk with truth. And that truth makes you undeniable. It's not charisma. It's coherence. It's not charm. It's depth. And that depth has gravity. It pulls, it challenges, it awakens. Not everyone will handle it. Some will flee. Some will resent the mirror you've become. Because your presence demands that others confront the parts of themselves they've long abandoned. But you don't dim anymore. You don't soften your edge to make others comfortable in their confusion. You don't dilute your discipline for the approval of those still addicted to distraction. You've outgrown the need to be digestible. You've outgrown the cages built from politeness, fear, and guilt. And in their place, a new infrastructure emerges forged from your own inner law. You walk through life like someone who doesn't need a rule book because your standard has become scripture. And every day you write new commandments. Commandments that don't just govern how you act, but how you exist. You don't enter rooms, you alter them. You don't chase connections, you create resonance. You don't follow energy, you set the tone, because now your life isn't reactive, it's ritual. Everything is intentional. The way you speak, the way you rest, the way you say no, the way you disappear when needed, not to escape but to fortify. You move like someone who has nothing to prove and everything to protect. You protect your peace not with walls, but with presence. You protect your mind not by avoiding chaos, but by becoming indisturbable. And the more you protect, the more you produce. Not just content, not just ideas, but impact. Because now you don't live for attention, you live for alignment. You don't aim to be seen, you aim to pierce. And the deeper your alignment, the stronger your field. People start to orbit you not because you demanded it, but because you've become unignorable. This is what happens when you grow beyond what broke you. You don't just rebuild, you reign. And when you begin to reign not over others, but over yourself, you enter a domain few ever reach. It's not dominance, it's dominion. You become the ruler of your own state, the sovereign force in your own kingdom. And your kingdom isn't made of gold or titles, it's made of choices. It's built from the silent decisions. No one sees the early mornings, the guarded boundaries, the moments you refuse to descend into old patterns when no one would have blamed you if you did. This is the throne most avoid, because this throne doesn't come with celebration, it comes with consequence. To sit here, you have to outgrow the language of complaint. You have to stop asking why it was hard and start asking who it shaped you into. You have to trade comfort for command, sympathy for strength, company for clarity. And now that you've claimed that seat, you don't just operate differently, you vibrate differently. You become allergic to your own mediocrity. The slightest compromise, the smallest lie, the most subtle self-abandonment, you feel it in your bones now. Because you've developed a sensitivity to anything that dilutes your truth. And that sensitivity becomes your compass. You don't need motivation anymore. You have momentum. You don't need applause anymore. You have a mission. You don't need to be understood anymore. You've become inevitable. And when you're inevitable, you stop chasing anything. You become what others chase. Not because you manipulated attention, but because you mastered alignment so precisely that everything out of sync either adjusts or gets erased. This is the edge where life stops being about survival or even success and becomes expression, where your actions aren't just strategy, they are sculpture. Every step is art. Every decision is sacred. Every moment is execution, not of a plan, but of a presence that cannot be faked. You are no longer a version of yourself you can abandon. You become rooted in reality, anchored in self-respect, sculpted in silence. And now the question is no longer, what did I overcome? The question is, what will I construct with the power I've earned? Because growth without creation is just recovery. And you didn't go through all this just to be okay. You came to build the unbuildable, to live in such radical coherence with your values that your life becomes a mirror for anyone still hiding. And if they can't handle the reflection, let them turn away. You're not here to comfort the counterfeit. You're here to cement the real. So this is where it ends. Not your story, but the illusion that you were ever broken beyond repair. Because now there is no returning to what was. There is no shrinking to fit, no dimming to survive, no waiting for permission from ghosts who once kept you silent. You've outlived the wound. You've outloved the fear. You've outgrown the version of you that needed to be rescued because you rescued yourself. And in doing so, you've become more than a survivor. You've become the embodiment of reclamation, of what it means to alchemize pain into presence, of what it looks like when someone who was shattered chooses not just to rebuild, but to reignite. And so now you walk, not away from the past, but forward, with it behind you like a shadow that no longer controls your light. You move as one who remembers everything but carries nothing. You breathe deeper. You speak truer. You live louder. Because the storm didn't steal your power. It revealed it. And that power, it's yours now. Fully, irrevocably, completely. So carry it with pride. Carry it with peace. And carry it like a sword forged in fire. Because no matter what comes next, you've already proven one thing. You were never meant to stay broken. You were meant to become the cure.